Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library, and today we are talking to another amazing law firm owner because one of the big things that you will definitely learn if you are a lawyer and you decide to start a firm is that you really do have to learn the business side of running a firm, which can be slightly different than just practicing law. So stay tuned for our amazing guest. Well, without further ado, let me bring on my amazing guest, Russell Farbiarz. Welcome to the show, Russell.
Thanks, Terrell. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's always a pleasure to have you. Now, Russell, before we jump into the details of, your firm and what that journey's been like, can you give
Mhm.
us a little bit of context on, what is your background and what made you decide to go into law?
I've wanted to be a lawyer for longer than I can remember. I I grew up always thinking that I was just going to be a lawyer, and it's funny. I was having this conversation with my dad on the phone yesterday uh, because we were talking about when I decided to go to law school, and sometimes the sad truth is that a lot of people go to law school because they don't know what else to do. I graduated from college with a politics degree and a history degree, and so I really was qualified to do one of two things: either teach or go to law school. Um, and I thought about both of those options, but I ended up going to law school.
No, when I went to undergrad, my background was in business administration. And one of the things I was always curious about when people, major in political science and then go to law school next. Does political science does it really prepare you for a law school, or is it just kind of like law school is like a whole new learning and discipline?
The only real undergraduate study program that can prepare you for law school, from what I understand, is philosophy. Uh, Being a politics major and a history major just means that I knew a lot about dead things, and I knew a lot about people who like to argue about policy. Uh, but being a philosophy major actually teaches you how to think more analytically, the way that the lawyer typically will do.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. So as you got into law school, did that did the nature of law school, I guess, when you got there, were you kind of prepared for it? I mean, since you had wanted to be a lawyer as long as you can remember when you got into law school, was it like, did it live up to your expectations? Were you like, hey, I kind of underestimated some of this, or?
Well, there's no way to really know what to expect when you're going to go to law school. And they do the in orientation, they do the proverbial look to your left, look to your right, one of these people won't be here by the time you graduate. And it's actually true. I don't really know exactly what I thought it was going to be, but it's definitely 3 years where you're just going to work and work and work and work, and then you're going to do some more work because it's intense. It's definitely intense.
Gotcha, gotcha. And then what was it like? I mean, coming out of law school when you first started, I guess your journey as a lawyer or moving down that path.
So I came out of law school. I When you're in law school, they tell you that the best job that you can get right out of law school is being a law clerk. I'm not sure that that's actually true. It all depends on what you want to do, but that's what I did. Is I got a job as a law clerk. I lived in Bennington, Vermont, for about a year, working for some trial court judges there. It was an interesting experience. I got to see a lot of different things, a lot of different proceedings, uh, but it was very much in an observer role, and I was sort of anxious to stop being an observer and start being an active participant. So after that, I did get a job with the district attorney's office, uh, and that gave me some experience being in the courtroom, uh, learning how to walk, talk, and chew gum at the same time while in a court proceeding. Uh, and then ultimately, I did end up in private practice.
Gotcha, gotcha. Now, how was that transition, or was there things that led to you making that decision of going into private practice?
So I was fortunate because the practice that I joined was actually my father-in-law's practice, and his partner was choosing to retire and had approached me and said, "I'm retiring. I'd like to see if you want to step into this role and take my place." And I was fortunate in that regard. I mean, working with family can always be a challenge, but um, you know, we found we were able to find a way to navigate things together. And so like I said, I was fortunate because that's because I sort of it wasn't that I started my own business. I came into an already existing and successful practice.
Gotcha, gotcha. Now, one of the other things that I'm curious about is, as you kind of go through law school, and like I said, your kind of early stage of, your legal career, it's at what point did you kind of decide, hey, this is the type of law that I kind of want to focus on?
You come out of law school and there's just so many different options. And the one thing when I was in law school, I said I don't want to do is criminal law, and there I was practicing criminal law as a prosecutor. Um, you know, but I always had an interest in estates and estate planning and estate administration. I did study that in law school. The practice I joined that did have had a very large it was a very large component of the practice that already existed. And so I continue to learn, more and more about about that practice area, and I really found it very interesting because I'm a big proponent of people having a plan and making sure that that they're being intentional, that you're putting the pieces together so that uh, when you would pass, that it's not absolute chaos, but there's actually an ordered process, and I think that is incredibly beneficial and
Mhm,
underutilized.
mhm. No, I would agree. I mean, it makes it probably a pretty interesting business perspective for, I mean, for you. I mean, estate planning is something that is, I think it's a phenomenal, is an extremely wise thing. I mean, from a business perspective, do you ever feel like you're fighting against the, I guess you'd say, the human need to not want to think about death and then not plan ahead?
All the time. That is, I'll never forget early in my practice, I had a client who came in, and I don't remember what she was there for, but I said to her, "Well, while you're here, do you want to prepare a will?" And she said, "Oh, not today, but I'll make sure I do that before I die." And I looked at her and I said, "All right, just give me a call the day before you die, and we'll get it taken care of." Needless to say, I'm fairly certain we did her will that day. Yeah.
It's so, when you say it out loud, it's something that sounds funny. I mean, when you say it, because it's like, wow, really, yeah, they're really, the logic behind that. It's just like, yeah, it doesn't make as much sense. But I often find that, that a lot of people don't like to think about those two, or they don't like to think about death, and they don't like to plan ahead. So as you kind of work through that in your business side, what have you seen people really gravitate to, or how have you been able to help people realize, like, hey, this is a plan to be made, like, let's act on it, let's not delay.
I try to talk to people about the fact that it is a plan. Uh, I have found that if we try to break things down into easy, more digestible steps, it's far easier for people to get on board with. Because I find that most people, when they get to the end of our process, they'll say, well, that was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. And and I have found, particularly as I've been more intentional with how I approach my business over the last, you know, say 2 years or so, that it's been a lot easier to sort of make that more accessible for people.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So what I really want to dive into a little bit more is, what that kind of that the way of thinking, how that kind of changed when you went from, like I said, practicing law to then, like I said, being a partner in a firm to where now you're practicing law, but you also got to think about, the actual business of the firm. So how was that transition for you?
You know, I've always looked, e- at the practice of law as a business. I've always thought of it, you know, conceptually in that way. I don't think that I ever, until, the last couple of years really thought about it and tried to implement, more business practices, um, in the practice, because I think as lawyers we are taught that we are professionals and we are lawyers and therefore we are special, which is not always true. Um, and if there are any lawyers that are listening to this, I'm sorry, you're not as special as you think you are. Um, and and as a result, we are told that we are exempt from the normal considerations that someone would have when they're running a business. Uh, there there are very few, if any, at least when I went to school, courses in law school that talk about running a practice. I The only one I recall there was, I think, a 2 credit course on interviewing clients. That was pretty much the extent of, here's how you actually do this from a practical business perspective. And then you're sort of in the midst of trying to manage deadlines and manage clients, and it's hard to sort of take a step back and say, now wait a second, what do I need to do to make sure that I'm doing things the most efficient in the most efficient way possible. i'm doing things I'm doing things that are going to actually make me money, rather than, just take every client that walks through the door, because they're here. Actually have a cohesive marketing plan, actually have procedures that can be followed, so that it's not you're not sort of at the hub of the wheel with everyone coming at you from all directions saying, I need X, Y, or Z. So it's you know uh, I feel like over the last 2 years I've spent a lot of time, uh, sort of thinking about how we can our my practice can run more like
Mhm.
a well-oiled machine, or like a business, as opposed to just a, lawyer-centric practice.
Mhm. Mhm. I think that's a very interesting point, and I'm glad you brought up the point about, with the type of clients that you expect, because even when I tell different, whether it's my clients or just business owners, or even on the show when I tell people, like, sometimes they're a little caught off guard. They're like, "Oh, you're an accountant. You should be thinking about getting every dollar you can," but it's just that point about, you probably shouldn't accept everybody who wants to do business with you if they don't meet the criteria that you have for the type of people that you can really help. So how has that been of, in the for yourself and in the firm, of just getting to that point where you felt really comfortable saying, you know what, we're gonna accept the people that we can actually help, and that may mean we don't there's some people that we can't help.
It's hard. I'm going to tell you that right out front, because it's really hard when someone knocks on your door, or in this case, walks into your Zoom room, and and says, "I want to give you money to do this thing that you know how to do." But I have I have gone from, well, of course I can do this and I can do that and I can do this other thing, to, yeah, I know I can do that, but I don't want to, because you can't be good at everything. And then that's how you end up running in 17 different directions. You keep if you don't do something all the time, don't have a process for it, now you're relearning it every time you do it, and so you're really not making any profit off of it. It's just you have at that point just bought yourself a job, not a business, and that's not And then who is it? I'm trying to remember the author, of the guy who wrote the E Myth, who says now you work for a crazy person.
I think that's so true because, just yesterday I was on the call. I was on a call, Zoom call with someone that was looking for a CPA to do an audit, and I am a CPA, and I was telling them it's like, well, here are the areas I focus on: bookkeeping and CFO services. And I will say it took me a while to get to that point of just being like, hey, here's a person who clearly they sought you out. They want to offer you money to do something that, I mean, technically I can do it. I could probably move some stuff around to make it work, but I'm just like, you know what? That's not in my primary wheelhouse. Like, that's not something we do on a regular basis. But being able, like I said, getting comfortable to say, hey, you know what? Maybe I can help you find somebody that can help you do that, because that's just not what we do.
And sometimes that's the best thing that you can do. I've been reducing some of the practice areas I covered, and one of those is that I formerly took family law cases. I no longer do that, but with some of the clients that I have, if the case is moving in a direction I don't want to go in, I have helped the client find new counsel, because I don't want to get stuck in something I'm no longer comfortable doing. But at the same time, you don't want the client to be stuck.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I guess, do you find, in case of practicing, doing estate planning and in real estate law, is that, do a lot of those cases end up bleeding over into family law, or do they usually see those? They usually are pretty clearly distinct.
They're usually clearly distinct from the outset. I mean, you can have elements of what I would call family law in an estate administration case, a probate case. Uh, you have to take in when you're doing estate planning. You have to take into consideration the family dynamics. So if there can be, again, aspects of of family law or divorce that you would take into consideration. But there's a difference between litigating a divorce and helping someone create a plan in case of divorce.
Gotcha. Okay. No, that makes sense. Now, one of the things that I think a lot of people are always very interested in is, when they hear the type of work that you do, the type of law that you support, that your firm supports, how can they either find you online, or how can they see what the firm is up to, and how they can work with you guys if they need your services?
Sure. So we have a fairly robust online presence. We do have our website, which is antonavichfarbiarz.com. So you can certainly access us there. If you go to contact us, that will actually get you directly into our CRM. So unfortunately for you, maybe you'll start getting some emails and some text messages about us. We also do have a Facebook page and an Instagram page that are fairly active, so you can find us both on Facebook and Instagram. And I also am on LinkedIn.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Well, before we wrap up, one of the questions that I always love asking every guest that comes on is, when you think about, kind of where you've been from your career and your background to where you are now with your firm, what's two pieces of wisdom that you would share with other law firm owners? And it could be a reiteration of something else that you've already said.
So be intentional and ask for help. I have found, particularly over the last 2 years, that being involved with business coaching programs that are geared towards attorneys has helped me a lot. I've met a lot of like-minded attorneys who I now feel like I have a community of people who I can bounce ideas off of. And I call them my advisory board because if I'm thinking about doing something new, I have, I think there's three, four, maybe five people in this group. And we're all sort of, single owner attorney law firms where you don't really have a lot of internal people to bounce these ideas off of. We share resources. Um, and I think it's also important, be intentional. Figure out what you want to do and then figure out the way to get there. Because otherwise you just end up, uh, going here, there, and everywhere, trying to get things done.
Awesome. I love it. Well, Russell, thank you for being an amazing guest on the show. It's been a pleasure having you.
All right. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like our content, be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want to see more of our exclusive content, you can subscribe and become a member on patreon.com/Business Talk Library. Hey, the Business Talk Library is the place where business makes sense.